What would you do if someone you trusted offered you a ride to start a new chapter of your life, but you never arrived at your destination? This question haunts the small Queensland town of Gin Gin, where 17-year-old Phoebe Bishop vanished on what should have been an ordinary Thursday morning. Phoebe wasn't just another missing person statistic. She was a vibrant teenager with wild red hair and an untamable spirit, someone her family described as their sunflower in a field of wildflowers. Her passion for music filled every room she entered. She loved fiercely and remained loyal to her siblings above all else. But that Thursday morning would mark the beginning of a nightmare. The morning of May 15, 2025, started like any other day for Phoebe, but it would become the last time anyone saw her alive. By the way, I'm curious, where are you tuning in from? Drop a quick comment, I read them all, and sometimes your ideas spark our next case. Phoebe had been staying with two housemates in a ramshackle property in Gin Gin, about 40 kilometers west of Bundaberg. The living arrangement wasn't ideal. She had described it to friends as a hellhole and told her aunt she was up shit creek and couldn't wait to leave. The teenager was planning to escape to Western Australia to reunite with her high school sweetheart, Levi, an 18-year-old boy who had been forced to relocate after his mother died in a tragic car accident. The couple had maintained their relationship through nightly video calls, falling asleep together on screen. Levi had splurged on a $1,000 Canon camera as a gift for Phoebe, knowing she wanted to explore photography. They had planned a romantic camping trip to Esperance on Western Australia's south coast. On that fateful Thursday morning, Phoebe's housemates 34-year-old James Wood and 33-year-old Tanika Bromley offered to drive her to Bundaberg Airport. She was scheduled to catch a flight to Brisbane, then continue to Perth to meet Levi. Phoebe packed her luggage and wore a green tank top with grey sweatpants for the journey. Wood and Bromley claimed they dropped Phoebe off at Airport Drive around 8:30 a.m., just over half a mile from the terminal. According to Wood's later account, they stopped the car to give her 5 minutes, give her own space to do what she needed to do, before her flight. When they returned to the vehicle after what was described as, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes or maybe 8, Phoebe had vanished without a trace. They assumed she had walked to the airport and boarded her flight. But something was terribly wrong. Airport security footage would later reveal a disturbing truth. Phoebe never entered the terminal. She never checked in for her flight. The last confirmed sighting showed her carrying luggage on Airport Drive, but she simply vanished after that moment. Her boyfriend Levi waited anxiously for her arrival in Perth. Her mother Kylie Johnson expected regular updates about the trip. Her siblings anticipated hearing about her adventures. But Phoebe's phone had been switched off since that morning conversation with Levi at 8:30 a.m. As hours turned into a full day, concern transformed into panic. Phoebe wasn't someone who disappeared without explanation. Her family knew she would never abandon the people she loved without a word. The initial police response treated this as a standard missing person case. Search teams scoured the Bundaberg area, hoping to find clues about where the teenager might have gone. But as days passed without any trace of Phoebe, investigators began to suspect something more sinister had occurred. On May 21, 6 days after Phoebe's disappearance, police made a significant decision. They seized the grey Hyundai 935 with Queensland registration 414EW3 that Wood and Bromley had used to transport Phoebe. The vehicle was immediately declared an active crime scene. The same day, authorities also cordoned off the Gin Gin property where Phoebe had been living. Forensic experts combed through both locations, collecting evidence in brown bags. Forensic teams reported unsettling scenes inside the house, including animal remains that investigators bagged for analysis. But these weren't the only secrets the investigation would uncover about Phoebe's housemates. Wood had been caught using dating apps behind Bromley's back. In February, friends had discovered his Tinder profile, where he advertised himself as looking for short-term fun. Despite confronting him with evidence of his infidelity, Bromley had chosen to stay in the relationship. Their domestic situation was far from stable. After police impounded their vehicle, Wood and Bromley faced additional charges for unrelated weapons offenses. Investigators allegedly discovered a shortened firearm, 2 replica handguns, and ammunition in the car. Bromley received strict bail conditions, including a curfew and orders not to see Wood. With their home and vehicle sealed as crime scenes, Wood was spotted living in the impounded car with at least one dog. Local residents confronted him, and video footage of these encounters later surfaced online. Perhaps most disturbing was Wood's behavior on social media. Days after Phoebe went missing, he posted a strangely detached 2-minute video of himself lip-syncing to Ed Sheeran's love song, Perfect. The heavily filtered footage showed Wood dramatically closing his eyes and biting a silver chain around his neck. When the lyrics mentioned listening to our favorite song, he looked emotionally at the camera while tapping his heart. The car appeared to be parked alongside bushland during the recording. Wood also posted a cryptic black and white selfie with the words, "Let it never be said I'm not where I need to be on time." Meanwhile, Phoebe's mother Kylie began an agonizing public vigil on social media. She shared daily posts pleading for information about her daughter. Community members posted photos of their front door lights on her Facebook profile, symbolically trying to guide Phoebe home. "I'm praying that the lights of Jin Jin and the world guide you back to me," Kylie wrote in one heartbreaking post. "Our lives and existence is nothing without you in our lives." 8 days after Phoebe's disappearance, the search expanded dramatically. Specialist police units, including homicide officers and divers, began combing through Goodnight Scrub National Park, more than an hour southwest of Bundaberg. State Emergency Service volunteers, drones, a life flight rescue helicopter, and cadaver dogs trained to detect human remains joined the massive search effort. The choice of this specific location wasn't random. Investigators had developed intelligence suggesting the area might hold answers about Phoebe's fate. For 5 days, search teams methodically worked through the bushland. They discovered items of interest that were collected and sent for forensic testing. Police remained tight-lipped about the specific nature of these discoveries, but they hinted that evidence may have been moved prior to their arrival in the area. You can imagine the emotional toll this took on Phoebe's family. Each day brought fresh hope that she might be found alive, followed by the crushing disappointment of another day without answers. On May 31, more than 2 weeks after Phoebe's disappearance, her mother made an official statement to Queensland police that was released to the public. Fighting back tears, Kylie Johnson addressed the camera directly. "This is a pain no person or family should ever have to experience," she said. "Phoebe was a beautiful, loving, kind person, and every day not knowing where she has been is devastating for us." But then Kylie said something that chilled everyone who heard it. "I still hold hope that Phoebe will come home, but I have to consider the possibility that she also won't. If the worst-case scenario has happened, I at least need to know where she is resting." Her mother's instincts would prove tragically accurate. The investigation had been building a case against Wood and Bromley for weeks. Despite their claims of innocence, inconsistencies in their stories and physical evidence were mounting. On June 5, after gathering mounting proof, police formally detained both housemates on charges connected to Phoebe's disappearance. James Wood, 34, and Tanika Bromley, 33, were each charged with serious criminal offenses including concealing evidence. The charges suggested that not only had they allegedly killed Phoebe, but they had also attempted to hide what happened. This was the moment everyone had feared but many had expected. The 2 people who claimed to have given Phoebe a helpful ride to the airport were now accused of being responsible for her death. Later that month, the search teams made a grim discovery in the Goodnight Scrub National Park. Days later, search teams uncovered critical evidence deep in the bushland, evidence police now say ties directly to Phoebe Bishop. The vibrant teenager who had dreamed of photography and camping trips with her boyfriend would never come home. The girl who video chatted with Levi every night, who loved her siblings fiercely, who filled rooms with music and laughter, she was gone. On the courthouse steps after Wood and Bromley's first court appearance, Phoebe's sister Kaylee made a direct appeal to the public. "If you've got any information about Phoebe, or the car or anything like that, just come forward," she said. 3 weeks is too long for us, as a family and all of her friends. We just want her home. She was loved and she's missed dearly. The case against Wood and Bromley will proceed through the courts, where they will face justice for the charges against them. Neither has entered pleas, and the legal process will determine their guilt or innocence. The investigation continues, as police work to understand exactly what happened during those crucial minutes on Airport Drive. But for Phoebe's family and friends, no court verdict will bring back the bright light that was extinguished on that May morning. What makes this case particularly heartbreaking is how Phoebe was trying to build a better life for herself. She had escaped a difficult living situation and was heading toward a fresh start with someone who loved her. The $1,000 camera Levi had bought her sits untouched, a symbol of dreams that will never be realized. The planned camping trip to Esperance will never happen. The nightly video calls have fallen silent forever. This case reminds us, even in ordinary moments, danger can lurk beneath the surface, and by the time we recognize the signs, it may be too late. Her story reminds us that behind every missing person case is a family left shattered, friends left grieving, and a community left searching for answers to questions that should never need to be asked. How do you explain to a little brother why his sister isn't answering her phone? How do you comfort a mother who will never again have her daughter curl up in her lap with wild crazy hair tickling her nose? Phoebe Bishop was 17 years old when her life was allegedly cut short by the very people who promised to help her reach her dreams. She deserved to see her 18th birthday, to explore photography, to marry her high school sweetheart, to become the person she was meant to be. Instead, she became a cautionary tale about trust, vulnerability, and the devastating consequences when people we depend on betray that faith in the most unthinkable way. Can illegal actions be justified to escape unbearable suffering? This question has always sparked heated discussions and reflections. And despite the difficulty of providing an unequivocal answer, human nature drives individuals to actions that later become the subject of deep analysis and social debates. Today, we will speak about a unique story that unfolded in one of the most remote corners of Australia. A small settlement called Lockhart in New South Wales, located between two powerful metropolises, Sydney and Melbourne, became the epicenter of events that would forever change the life of one family. It was a typical rural town with a population of slightly over 800 inhabitants, where everyone knew each other, where traditional values and a leisurely rhythm of life prevailed. It was here, among fertile fields and cozy farms, that the Hunt family resided. The family unit consisted of 5 members, a father, a mother, and 3 children. The head of the family, Geoff Hunt, was 44 years old, a sturdy man with the hard-working hands of a farmer and intelligent eyes. His wife Kim, 3 years younger, was his complete opposite and simultaneously his perfect complement. Their love story began during their student years when both were full of energy, ambition, and belief in the future. Geoff and Kim's acquaintance quickly grew into a strong relationship. They married, dreaming of a large, friendly family where mutual respect and support would reign. Even years later, the couple remained extraordinarily active, intellectually developed, and purposeful. In the local community, they were respected not only for their professional achievements but also for their humanity, sociability, and community involvement. Kim had cherished a dream of helping people since childhood, which is why she purposefully chose medical education. After graduating from university, she found work as a nurse in the intensive care unit. Each workday for her was an opportunity to save someone's life, to realize her most cherished dream. In her free time, she loved horseback riding and devoted much attention to her home garden, her personal corner of comfort and tranquility. Geoff dedicated himself to the family's agricultural business, growing rapeseed. Together with his brother Alan, he continued his parents' work, carefully cultivating the land parcels that had been passed down to them. The man understood that agriculture was not just a job, but a way of life, a tradition that needed to be preserved and developed. The family had once gone through a challenging domestic period, but they managed to overcome all challenges, once again revealing the best qualities in each other. Their children, 3 of the most precious beings whom the parents unconditionally loved and supported, significantly contributed to this. At the moment of this narrative, the children were at different ages. The eldest, Fletcher, was 10 years old, the middle child was 8, and the youngest, Phoebe, was 6 years old. The Hunt family was a true example for the local community, especially due to their active volunteer work and constant readiness to help and support anyone in need. Despite their successful professional activities, Kim's medical work and Geoff's farming, the Hunt family encountered an extraordinarily challenging life trial in 2012. Tragic events began on an ordinary day when Kim went on a trip with her younger daughter Phoebe. The car accident that occurred that day would forever change the family's life. As a result of the crash, the vehicle rolled over twice, and the consequences were horrific. Miraculously saved, 6-year-old Phoebe suffered only minor injuries, but her mother's condition caused the most serious concern. Doctors literally fought for Kim's life, noting minimal chances of survival. The prolonged medicinal coma became a test for the entire family. Medical personnel were extremely pessimistic, practically leaving no hope for recovery. Moreover, specialists considered Kim exclusively as a potential organ donor, which definitively undermined any hopes for her full restoration. Geoff Hunt categorically rejected such a verdict. The man demonstrated incredible endurance and love, being by his wife's side daily. He believed in a miracle and made maximum efforts for her rehabilitation. In fact, Kim had to relearn the simplest life skills: how to walk, speak, and perform basic household actions. The local community supported the head of the family. Geoff single-handedly maintained the household, raised 3 children, and cared for his wife. Relatives tried to help, but it was insufficient. Eventually, the man hired a professional caregiver for Kim and a household assistant, which significantly eased the family's situation. Medical specialists and close ones unanimously recognized the cardinal changes in Kim's personality. After the accident, the woman tired quickly, had significant problems with self-control and emotional stability. Sudden mood swings were frequent, most often manifesting through aggression toward Geoff. The man showed incredible patience, understanding the complexity of the rehabilitation process. Over time, positive dynamics became noticeable. Kim gradually restored her ability to move and engage in household chores. The woman sharply rejected the role of a dependent, striving for independence and self-sufficiency. Her former professional nature as a nurse fought against her current condition. Returning to professional activities at that moment seemed absolutely unrealistic. Her physical and psychological recovery was too complicated. Kim's rehabilitation turned into a daily feat. The woman moved through the house with extraordinary difficulty, applying maximum effort to maintain the family household and care for 3 children. Every movement, every task was incredibly challenging. For a person who had suffered devastating trauma to the brain and spinal cord, daily household activities became a true triumph of will and endurance. Problems began to accumulate in all areas of the family's life, especially affecting the couple's relationship. Geoff found himself in an extremely difficult situation. In addition to constant care for his wife and children, the man was forced to continue working on the farm. The family's financial situation was becoming critical. Expenses for treatment, medications, and additional care were exhausting the family budget, forcing them to literally fight for survival every day. The rehabilitation period became an incredibly harsh test for Geoff. Nervous breakdowns and constant psychological tension affected the man. The harvest season added extra stress. Despite all the difficulties, the farm continued to function, bringing sufficient income for the family's comfortable existence. Kim's psychological state caused serious concern. The woman repeatedly confided to medical professionals about an unbearable desire for death, believing that her family would be better off without her. These alarming moods forced Geoff to take urgent measures. All firearms were removed from the farm to prevent a potential tragedy. However, weapons were necessary for agricultural needs and self-defense. Therefore, they were soon returned but carefully hidden from Kim. Forced leave and the inability to work in her profession were extremely difficult for the woman's psychological state. The only true light and comfort for her remained her children, three of the most precious beings for whom she fought for life every day. The year 2013 became a turning point in the recovery process. Kim finally managed to return to professional activities, albeit in a significantly limited format. Initially, she worked only 8 hours a week, primarily engaged in training young medical staff and trainees. Frequent memory lapses and quick fatigue did not allow her to return to her previous work rhythm. Despite this, the woman again joined volunteer activities, demonstrating an incredible spirit and desire to be useful. Kim's professional mission took on special significance, as it directly touched upon her personal life experience. Her activities were focused on educational work regarding road safety and the consequences of traumatic brain injuries. Through her own painful experience, she not only sought support among those around her but also became a source of support for other victims. By August 2014, the Hunt family was gradually returning to their usual rhythm of life. Kim's sister, Jenny, visited her to congratulate her younger daughter on her 6th birthday. The atmosphere of the celebration resembled pre-catastrophe times, which brought genuine joy to Jenny. It seemed that all difficulties were left behind, and life was entering a calm course. She could not yet foresee that this would be her last meeting with her sister. On September 8, 2014, a typical day for the family began. Kim took the children to the school bus stop and then returned home. The household helper, Lauren, was also present in the Hunt household that day. The school day for the children passed without any special events. Around 2:30, the children returned home with their mother. The day before, Father's Day was celebrated, so Geoff planned to spend time with his children. Kim, considering the consequences of her previous injuries, needed daytime rest and took a short nap. The day was developing quite smoothly, with a positive atmosphere, until a minor conflict arose with the older son over a football match. Geoff, who was refereeing children's sports competitions, believed that 10-year-old Fletcher had violated the rules of the game. The mother tried to calm down her disappointed son. After this incident, Geoff left his family at home and went to his parents' farm. He planned to visit them on the holiday but came alone. According to him, Lauren, the children, and Kim were supposed to remain at the farm to complete certain tasks. Geoff's parents immediately noticed a change in their son's emotional state. He looked lost, did not demonstrate his usual cheerfulness, and it was difficult to maintain a normal conversation. For a man who usually stood out for his sociability and positive mood, such behavior was uncharacteristic. They tried to find out the reason for his depression, but Geoff avoided a frank conversation and soon returned home. According to the testimony of the household helper Lauren, a minor conflict occurred that day between Geoff and Kim. Despite not seeming serious, the man was upset and decided to play golf, leaving his wife with the children. Upon returning home, the head of the family instructed the children to take a shower, approximately at 7 p.m. Before a light evening meal, they watched a family TV show. Apparently, internal family tensions did not subside. During a conversation with the helper, Kim expressed dissatisfaction with her husband, calling him lazy. The reasons for her irritation were varied. Geoff had allowed the children to consume unhealthy food and watch television contrary to established family rules. Moreover, she shared deeper concerns with Lauren. According to her, one of Geoff's brothers had groundlessly used family fund money to purchase a house and a car. Additionally, her husband was paying significant sums to his family from the same fund, which caused her serious concern. Geoff was not present during this conversation and did not hear it, so the conflict did not escalate. The household maintained an outwardly calm atmosphere. Around 7:30 in the evening, the housekeeper Lauren was preparing to go home. The children warmly said goodbye to her, and Geoff cheerfully called out, "Goodbye, thank you, see you tomorrow." But these words were not destined to come true. Later, in her police statement, Lauren would recount that there was a certain tension in the family, but she could not have imagined the horror that would unfold after her departure. Returning to the farm that day, as usual, she saw Kim lying on the lawn 3 meters from the house, still wearing her nightgown. At first, Lauren thought the mistress had fallen and needed help. Running closer, she noticed that Kim was motionless, and her face was hidden under two jackets. Throwing off the outer clothing, Lauren realized the worst: it was already impossible to help Kim. The woman was dead, from a gunshot wound to the head. Her body was covered in blood, and her skin had already cooled. The housekeeper was terrified to her core and immediately called emergency services. Medics, arriving at the scene, confirmed the fatal outcome. Kim had been fatally wounded almost point-blank, the shot hitting just above her right eye, eliminating any chances of rescue. In the corridor, they immediately found a cartridge shell on the floor. All evidence indicated that the murder had occurred right there, as Kim would not have been physically capable of reaching the lawn after the shot. After the initial examination, the medics left the premises, fearing the possible presence of a perpetrator. Despite the potential danger, Lauren, together with the medics, waited for the police to arrive. The household helper was in a state of anxiety, recognizing the need to meet the children from school, especially considering that Geoff had not yet been found. Lauren felt that even more horrifying news awaited her. When the police arrived and examined the premises, they shared a shocking fact: the children had not attended Catholic School of St. Joseph that day, a school with only 74 students. The absence of all three children immediately caught the officials' attention. In the rooms of the younger children, Fletcher and Phoebe, they discovered bodies. They had most likely been sleeping in different rooms during the tragic events. 8-year-old May had managed to wake up. Each child had a single gunshot wound to the head. May's eyes were wide open. On the kitchen table, they found a note on a napkin made by the eldest daughter Phoebe as a gift. The text was written in an adult's handwriting: "I'm sorry, this is all my fault, completely my fault." The origin of the note remained a mystery. It was speculated that Geoff, the family's husband, might have written it. At that moment, his whereabouts were unknown. He was not making contact. Versions varied, whether the man had fled after the murder or had become a victim of unknown criminals who killed his family. The only way to clarify the circumstances of the murder was to find 40-year-old Geoff. An extensive search was immediately announced, and active search measures began. The crime scene investigation did not reveal any signs of third-party intervention, no fingerprints, genetic traces, and no signs of forced entry into the house. Information about the horrific tragedy spread lightning fast among local residents. People were in shock and bewilderment, trying to comprehend the scale of what had happened. Neighbors could not believe that Geoff was capable of such terrible crimes. Many sincerely thought that the man might have become a victim of unknown attackers. Sympathy and deep concern prevailed in the community. Local residents demanded an immediate investigation, eager to establish the truth as quickly as possible and ensure the community's safety. Law enforcement had been investigating the perimeter of the agricultural land for an extended period. The next day, they discovered fresh automotive tracks that led investigators to a small water reservoir located several hundred meters from the Hunt family's property. Divers, examining the water body, found Geoff Hunt's body at a depth of 1.5 meters, along with a traumatic pistol. The man had died from a gunshot wound to the upper part of his skull, and it was absolutely evident that the tragic shot was fired by himself. The traumatic pistol was placed directly into his oral cavity. The forensic examination established that the body had been in the water for approximately 30 hours. Criminalists conducted a thorough comparison of Geoff's handwriting with previously written greeting cards to his wife and the suicide note found on the dining table. The expert analysis conclusively showed a 100% match, which unequivocally pointed to Geoff's involvement in the tragic events. A comprehensive reconstruction of the sequence of tragedy proved practically impossible due to the complete absence of witnesses. However, the investigation managed to establish the horrifying circumstances. The family head, Geoff, cold-bloodedly deprived 3 of his sleeping children of life, after which he shot his wife, who was attempting to flee the house. Apparently, later the man felt deep remorse and awareness of his actions. He left the crime scene, got into his old automobile, and drove along a dirt road. After traveling several hundred meters, he turned into a wheat field and proceeded towards the water reservoir, where his abandoned car was ultimately found. The motive for the crime remained absolutely incomprehensible to the local community. Many residents of Caloocan City respected Geoff Hunt so deeply that they categorically refused to accept the obvious evidence of his involvement in the crime. Geoff was a well-known figure in the city, a diligent farmer, a judge at children's football competitions, an active volunteer, and a participant in socially significant community initiatives. This multifaceted activity evoked an extremely complex and ambiguous reaction from local residents. Among the population, alternative versions even emerged about a possible involvement of his wife Keane. Some neighbors who previously were not particularly well disposed towards her suggested that she might have been the initiator of the tragedy. The version was based on rumors about her alleged tendency towards depressive states and a desire to leave this world. However, the investigation unequivocally proved the groundlessness of this version. Geoff was found with a traumatic pistol on his person, whereas Keane did not have one. Moreover, the location of the cartridge and its distance from the presumed trajectory of movement made impossible the version about her involvement in the murder. Ultimately, the expertise conclusively proved, a deliberate murder was committed directly by Geoff Hunt. The forensic examination unequivocally confirmed the impossibility of Kim's involvement in the murder. Her physical condition precluded performing such actions. The right side of her body had significant functional limitations that made weapon manipulation impossible. Not a single expert expressed doubt about the perpetrator of the crime, it was Geoff Hunt. Even after law enforcement presented irrefutable evidence of Geoff's involvement in murdering his own family, protective sentiments continued to emerge in the local community. The man had created such an impeccable public image that he began to be perceived almost like a martyr. An objective assessment of events left no smallest space for justification. The fact that Geoff deprived 3 minors and his wife, who had suffered a severe automobile trauma, of life made any sympathy impossible. Despite this, the local community demonstrated incredible solidarity, funds were collected, and a funeral was organized for the entire family with maximum honors. For investigators, it was extremely important to conduct the most detailed investigation possible. The mass murder could not be hushed up or ignored, it needed to be comprehensively analyzed to prevent similar tragic incidents in the future. Detectives attempted to find a logical explanation for the crime's motive. On that fatal day, Geoff was in a state of emotional tension due to a conflict with his son and a subsequent argument with his wife. However, such behavior was atypical for him. In the presence of the housekeeper, the family atmosphere usually remained controlled. Geoff and Kim traditionally demonstrated an ability to constructively resolve any contradictions. They maintained calm and balance, and nothing indicated a potential tragedy. The housekeeper testified that she had never previously seen Geoff aggressive. He did not raise his voice, did not demonstrate physical aggression towards his wife or children, and even less showed a tendency to use weapons. In contrast to her husband, Kim could be emotionally unstable. During periods when she forgot to take antidepressants, there were instances of her sharp emotional outbursts directed at family members. The version about Geoff's prolonged deep depression seemed unlikely. It would have been extremely difficult to conceal such a psycho-emotional state from his closest circle, relatives who maintained constant contact, and the housekeeper who was in the house daily. None of them noticed any harbingers of the future tragedy. Yes, Geoff had certain problems in the financial sphere, but they were not critical in nature. He was entirely capable of continuing to support his family and actively seek ways to resolve difficulties. His personal profile indicated an extraordinarily high level of responsibility, acquired through years of conscientious work and social activity. Reconstructing the sequence of events literally piece by piece, investigators concluded that the tragedy did not show signs of a premeditated murder, but rather resembled a sudden emotional outburst. The man demonstrated usual behavior and, up to the moment of his wife's departure, had specific plans for the near future, acting like a responsible father and caring family man. On the eve of the tragic events, Geoff prepared school lunches for the children and arranged a tennis match with a friend for the weekend. Neither of the spouses kept personal notes or diaries where hidden conflicts or preconditions for violence might have been contained. Instead, Aiken's plans had clearly defined future events, which indirectly testified to their intentions to continue living together, working, and developing. It turned out that Geoff regularly consulted a psychotherapist, confessing that he feared loneliness most of all. A few weeks before the fatal events, his wife Kim shared with a relative her dissatisfaction with the family's financial state, which periodically created tension. Moreover, she openly stated her cooling feelings towards her husband and even considered the possibility of divorce. It is assumed that this might have provoked Geoff's critical emotional state. Several psychological experts were immediately involved in the investigation for an in-depth analysis of the situation. After studying the case materials and communicating with the couple's surroundings, specialists discovered pronounced signs of depression in Geoff Hunt, dejection, internal anxiety, and emotional exhaustion. On the eve of the tragedy, the man behaved extremely silently, obviously hiding something. Close ones noticed his psychological discomfort and tried to ascertain the reasons. The peculiarity of male psychology lies in the fact that men rarely speak openly about internal problems, perceiving a request for help as a demonstration of weakness. Prolonged internal struggle with emotional experiences forced Geoff to continue leading his usual lifestyle without demonstrating the accumulated psychological tension externally. He meticulously concealed his internal imbalance, which only intensified his psycho-emotional state. Psychological experts suggest that the man's primary motive could have been a desire to leave life due to deep depression and the loss of any hope for positive changes. The method of using a firearm, inflicting a single fatal wound, may also indicate an attempt to minimize the physical suffering of family members. The housekeeper expressed understanding that Geoff was under colossal psychological pressure in various life dimensions, particularly due to coexisting with his wife Kim after her severe trauma, which radically changed her personality. Apparently, the man had simply exhausted all his internal resistance reserves. Kim's relatives share a similar opinion. The accident so radically complicated their family life that Geoff obviously considered the tragic scenario as the only possible way out. His wife no longer resembled the woman he had married, and ultimately, the man could not withstand the psychological burden. Psychological experts concluded that Geoff's original intent did not include physically destroying his relatives. Most likely, he planned only to deprive himself of life due to accumulated internal problems, anxieties, and potential divorce prospects. However, in a critical moment, he made a radical decision to completely eliminate the family. He evidently interpreted his act as a kind of salvation. Being the sole breadwinner of the family, Geoff was aware that his suicide would condemn his loved ones to a miserable existence, so he decided to radically prevent such an adverse development of events. From his distorted psychological perspective, the act looked almost merciful. The head of the family quickly and minimally painfully deprived each family member of life with a single shot to the head, as he did not want them to suffer prolonged pain. In psychiatric practice, such behavior is classified as an ultra-altruistic or pseudo-altruistic model. In any case, the Hunt family tragedy will forever remain in criminalistic annals as one of the most horrific examples of family violence. According to comprehensive scientific research, the absolute majority of family annihilators are men. According to Professor Wilson, a world-renowned researcher of family crimes, the proportion of men in such crimes reaches approximately 95%. The most obvious common characteristic is precisely the male nature of such criminal acts. After analyzing hundreds of cases of family destruction, researchers refute common myths and destroy stereotypes about criminals. It turns out that murderers are not necessarily disappointed failures with a long history of defeats. A significant portion of such individuals have achieved substantial professional success. Statistics show that 71% were employed in various professional spheres, from surgery and marketing to postal service, law enforcement, and freight transportation. After studying the motivational models of male annihilators, Wilson and his research group identified 4 typological groups. However, the common denominator for all without exception cases was a specific interpretation of male masculinity, established ideas about gender roles, and the place of a man in the family structure. In each of the considered cases, ideas about masculinity and strength formed the psychological basis for crimes. The family role of a man occupied a central place in their coordinate system, and murder appeared to be the last desperate attempt to prove and realize their own male identity. Professor Wilson's research identified 4 specific psychological profiles of family annihilators. The first type, a self-confident destructor who completely transfers responsibility for the crime to the victim. For him, the central aspect is the status of a punisher who supposedly carries out an act of restoring justice. The second type, a disappointed destroyer who is convinced that his family betrayed his expectations or undermined his worldview. In his consciousness, the family appears as a source of deep personal collapse. The third type, an anomic destroyer who perceives the family structure as a demonstration platform for his economic achievements. He falls into a rage when he realizes that the family no longer functions as a status symbol of his success. The fourth type, a paranoid aggressor who sees an external threat to the family system, considering himself the only possible protector. Professor Wilson emphasized that all these types are united by a hyperbolized perception of male roles and parental responsibilities. The scientist discovered an interesting pattern: self-confident killers often choose symbolic dates to realize their criminal intentions, for example, Father's Day. In Geoff Hunt's specific case, this pattern is particularly pronounced. The man destroyed his family 2 days after the professional holiday for parents. Moreover, suicide notes were left on a gift given by one of his children for this family holiday. Domestic violence specialists recorded a quite revealing social reaction. Some communities showed such militant readiness to defend men that they began to spread versions about the alleged involvement of Geoff's wife Kim in the children's murder. As if Geoff acted as a kind of white knight who avenged his family. However, law enforcement categorically rejected such assumptions. There are no objective evidence to confirm such a version. Eloquent is Geoff Hunt's own handwritten letter, which clearly states, "Forgive me, this is completely my fault, and we must not forget about this." Tiahleigh Palmer, a 12-year-old girl standing on the threshold of life's trials. Her ordinary teenage fate turned into a tragic series of circumstances. Her life path proved to be complex and dramatic, filled with painful challenges. The girl's biological mother was forced to transfer her to Child Protective Services due to a real threat posed by her husband, Tiahleigh. The woman was convinced that this decision would be the only chance to protect her daughter and give her an opportunity for a future. Unexpectedly, the kindness of strangers did not bring the anticipated salvation. The girl, whom her relatives still called Tia, was awaiting a horrific tragedy. Tiahleigh Suprok forced his wife Cindy to relinquish parental rights and transfer Tiahleigh to the foster care system. For Cindy, this was a forced decision. She considered it the only correct way to save her own child. Being a victim of domestic violence herself, the woman sought to protect her daughter from a similar fate. She had no opportunities for full child rearing due to destructive family circumstances. Tiahleigh grew up as a disobedient, impulsive child who often ran away from home to avoid witnessing parental conflicts. In January 2015, Child Protective Services decided to place the 12-year-old girl in a foster family in the small town of Chambers Field, located approximately an hour's drive from Brisbane. It was a typical Australian town with a population of about 2,500 residents. The new family for Tiahleigh became the Thornbuns, family head Rico, his wife Julia, and 2 sons, 19-year-old John and 18-year-old Trent. By this point, the girl had already changed several foster families, as her difficult character did not allow for quick adaptation. Some considered her too conflictual. The Thornbun family was no exception to this rule. Tiahleigh was extremely dissatisfied with the prospect of living with 2 older teenage boys. However, she had no choice. At that time, the Thornburn couple, Rico and Julia, had been married for over a quarter of a century. The husband had previously worked as a large transport driver, but after a serious spinal injury, he was forced to radically change his profession. He founded a small fast food business using a mobile food truck and simultaneously maintained a small horse farm. Rico's wife, Julia, ran a home-based daycare. The Thornburn family was considered impeccable, respected, and exemplary in all social circles. This was precisely why Child Protective Services chose this family to place Tiahleigh. For 4 months, it seemed that the girl had successfully adapted to her new family. She was attending Morrison State School, located 20 minutes from home. Life finally appeared to have settled into a calm routine, her environment had grown accustomed to her, and she had made peace with her household. In reality, the situation was much more complex than it appeared on the surface. October 30, 2015, began as an ordinary day for the Thornburn family. Rico drove his foster daughter to school, after which he returned home and began repairing his own car. A few hours later, he received a call from the school reporting Tiahleigh's absence from classes. Such escapes were not unusual, the girl was accustomed to running away from problems. However, this time her searches proved futile, despite her typically quick returns or swift discovery. Rico posted on social media, carefully describing the situation and pleading for help in finding the girl. However, his appeal remained unanswered. The foster family knew about Tiahleigh's enthusiasm for Halloween, she eagerly anticipated the holiday and had even prepared a costume. Therefore, her sudden disappearance on the eve of the celebrations seemed especially strange. Soon, the family contacted the police, and the teenager was reported missing. In essence, almost no active searches were conducted, as everyone was convinced that the girl would soon return after another of her typical escapes. Less than a week after her disappearance, early in the morning of November 5, 2015, an alarming call came to the police. A local fisherman reported to emergency services about a horrifying discovery, a body found in the reed thickets of a shallow Pamplona stream. The location was approximately 30 kilometers south of Tiahleigh's last known location from a week prior. During this period, the body had significantly deteriorated, likely due to local fauna activity and the region's specific climatic conditions. The arriving law enforcement officers could not even definitively determine the body's gender, let alone identify the individual. They could only approximately establish the age as teenage. The body's condition induced horror and shock. Minimal clothing was present on the body, only underwear. Upon discovery, the body was immediately sent for forensic examination. By cross-referencing the finding with the list of missing persons in the area, the police hypothesized that this could be the body of 12-year-old Tiahleigh, who had disappeared a week earlier. Subsequently, the police version was confirmed by DNA laboratory analysis. The law enforcement's worst assumptions found their horrifying confirmation. During the examination, it was established that the wounds, initially perceived as animal bite marks, were actually inflicted by a human. 12-year-old Tiahleigh had become a victim of inhuman violence. The case was reclassified as a murder, after which a thorough investigation began. Considering that Rico Thornburn was the last person, according to the investigation, who had seen Tiahleigh alive, law enforcement initially focused on his testimony. From the very first moments of communication, the man aroused serious suspicion with his ambiguous behavior and inconsistencies in his statements. However, all versions required careful verification and documentary confirmation. The investigators decided to also interview other members of the foster family, perhaps someone possessed additional information. Preliminary interviews with family members provided no substantial data. Everyone unanimously confirmed the family head's version that he personally drove the daughter to school at 7 in the morning. No one else had seen the missing girl. The next step was for investigators to go directly to the educational institution to verify the family's testimony. It was there that they managed to obtain fundamentally new information. Detectives conducted a large-scale interrogation, over 100 people were questioned, including Tiahleigh's classmates, her friends, and teachers. An extremely strange and alarming fact emerged: no witness had seen the girl at the school that day, not even near the educational facility. Checking video cameras in the schoolyard and at the entrance confirmed, Tiahleigh had not come to school on the day of her disappearance, which raised additional questions. Where could the child have gone? During the investigation, unexpected testimony emerged from Tiahleigh's school friends. One of them told the detectives an extremely troubling story. The day before, the girl had begged her to take her home, claiming that terrible things were happening in the foster family and that serious troubles awaited her. However, due to her young age, the friend could not independently decide to provide shelter. She did not comprehend the full seriousness of the situation. And soon after, Tiahleigh tragically died. The friend believed that these events could be interconnected. However, Tiahleigh had not detailed what exactly was happening in the foster family. After additional questioning of other students, the police concluded that there were no obvious persons in the girl's immediate circle who could have harmed her. Suspicions towards the Thornburn foster family continued to intensify, so investigators meticulously continued to check every detail of their testimony. The foster family categorically rejected any accusations of domestic violence, claiming that Tiahleigh was simply inventing stories, as she had done in previous instances when she ran away and complained about other families. Law enforcement carefully verified the provided information and established that Tiahleigh indeed had a tendency to run away and was considered a challenging teenager. Everyone who was closely familiar with the family, as well as neighbors, unanimously claimed that this was an exemplary family. Many parents willingly entrusted their children to their private daycare, and none could believe that such respected people could have done anything bad to Tiahleigh. The vast majority of those around were convinced that the girl had simply run away and fabricated another story about mistreatment, and had actually found herself in a difficult situation and become a victim of an attack. As a result, the police had no substantial grounds for suspicion and effectively distanced themselves from investigating the foster family. They also seemed to believe that this was a flawless family, so they began searching for the reasons behind the murder in other directions. Meanwhile, the foster family continued to operate the daycare without any hindrance. During the investigation, detectives interrogated approximately 300 registered sexual offenders in the region who were suspected of possible involvement in a sexual assault, but this did not provide any substantial leads or the slightest hints about the circumstances of the teenager's disappearance. Most of those questioned had solid alibis, some had already moved away from the area, and as a result, no specific suspect was identified. On December 4, 2015, shoes that likely belonged to Tiahleigh were found 100 meters from the body's discovery site, along with her school backpack. This tragic story became so widely publicized that it instantly attracted public attention. Information about the high-profile case was broadcast on almost all Australian television channels, as a result of which the incident became known in every corner of the country. Before the funeral, several large-scale pickets took place, during which people demanded to find those responsible for the girl's horrific death, who obviously did not deserve such a fate. The biological mother of the deceased personally organized protest actions and persistently demanded detailed explanations from law enforcement regarding her daughter's death, repeatedly appearing on television broadcasts to draw wide public attention. The woman was extremely outraged by the inaction of Child Protection Services, to whom she had once entrusted her daughter. Partially because of this, over 600 people were present at the farewell ceremony, most of whom had not even known Tiahleigh during her life but came to pay their respects and sympathy to the unfortunate child. Many of those present were dressed in white and purple t-shirts with heart images and Tiahleigh's name. Purple was the girl's favorite color. Around 400 white roses were laid on her grave, and as the hearse departed, purple balloons were released into the sky, symbolizing farewell. 5 months had passed since Tiahleigh Palmer's tragic death, and law enforcement was still in complete informational uncertainty. To obtain any testimony, a cash reward was announced, an impressive sum of 250,000 Australian dollars, approximately equivalent to 160,000 US dollars. The girl's biological mother actively used media space, emotionally appealing to the public. She passionately implored possible witnesses to come forward and urged the perpetrators to confess. In addition to the large monetary reward, police guaranteed complete immunity from prosecution to any person who was not the direct perpetrator of the crime but would provide critically important information. Despite all efforts, gathering useful information proved impossible. The police received occasional phone calls from concerned citizens, but none contained substantial data for the investigation. Summer 2016 arrived, and the police still did not have even a probable suspect. Detectives methodically interrogated individuals previously involved in sexual crimes. The critical state of body decomposition made it impossible for forensic experts to obtain any significant evidence, so investigators could not even precisely determine the direct cause of death. The only expert assumption was based on a discovered fracture of the hyoid bone, which indirectly suggested strangulation. The most plausible theory of the investigation at that moment was kidnapping by a random motorist near the school, as the area where children were dropped off was not equipped with video surveillance systems, creating a potential risk zone. However, this remained merely a theoretical version of law enforcement. The reward of $250,000 designated for information that would help detain the criminal had still not interested anyone. Only in May 2016, after more than 6 months of exhausting work, an anonymous phone call arrived at the police station with unexpected information. An unknown caller assured that they had fundamentally important testimony regarding Tiahleigh and the Thornburn foster family. According to the anonymous source, the Thornburns had deliberately sought a problematic child from the beginning, as this provided an opportunity to receive increased state assistance. They demonstrated no emotional feelings towards Tiahleigh, having exclusively mercenary interests. Moreover, the interlocutor asserted with complete certainty the potential involvement of all family members in the tragic events surrounding Tiahleigh. However, the information ended there. The man suddenly hung up, providing no additional details. The identity of the anonymous informant could not be established, despite all attempts to obtain additional information. Considering the unexpected phone call, law enforcement decided to return to the version of possible involvement of the foster family in the murder. At the initial stage of the investigation, they had not paid attention to students' testimony about domestic violence in the Thornburn family. However, they failed to confirm previous assumptions, and the version was rejected. Now, detectives decided to focus again on the foster family. During the verification of the anonymous witness's information, police conducted repeated interviews with school students. One of the victim's friends revealed shocking details about the relationship between Tiahleigh and 19-year-old Trent Thornburn, a local heartthrob. Due to her young age, the girl did not fully understand the nature of the relationship, sincerely believing it was genuine, as Trent assured her. She was even in love and fascinated by the horses on their farm. At the same time, Tiahleigh felt a strong fear of Trent and the entire family, which made her want to escape. Assumptions emerged about the existence of not only emotional but also severe physical violence against a minor. The student's testimony required careful verification, but repeated interrogations of family members yielded no results. They all categorically denied any suspicions, especially regarding sexual harassment of a minor. Due to serious suspicions, the Thornburns' guardianship permission was immediately revoked, and their foster family status was suspended. Law enforcement installed listening devices in their house, receiving shocking information daily that destroyed the image of a respectable family. In particular, they managed to establish a critically important detail. On October 29, 2015, the family held a family meeting on the eve of the girl's disappearance. During this meeting, Trent complained to his parents about abdominal pain, which caused serious concern and suspicions about the possible pregnancy of the 12-year-old girl. It turned out that the foster family had learned about the younger son's intimate relationship with Tiahleigh shortly before her disappearance. Trent contacted her exclusively during moments when other family members were absent. During the wiretapping, he admitted to having sexual relations with his foster sister multiple times. Their relationship had lasted about 10 months, practically the entire period of her stay under the Thornbons' care. Eventually, 19-year-old Trent approached his parents out of fear of Tiahleigh's possible pregnancy. He was panic-stricken about the disclosure of information about their relationship, understanding that the 7-year age difference essentially made him a criminal. The family head, Rico, calmed his son, instructing him not to worry. He will personally handle this problem. From the analyzed dialogues of the Thorburn family, it became evident that the underage girl experienced an extremely deep, almost panic-level fear of her foster father. Her greatest horror was the prospect of being left alone with him. It was entirely logical that such experiences were not groundless or random. Other family members demonstrated an equally pronounced fear and tension in his presence. Subsequently, it was confirmed that behind the family's outward respectability, an extremely dangerous and cruel personality was hidden. That evening, after concluding the discussion, Rick categorically expelled all family members, remaining alone with his foster daughter. When the rest of the family returned a few hours later as previously agreed, the girl was no longer there. Regarding her disappearance, the head of the family responded with extreme brevity: the girl had supposedly run away, and all problems with her were resolved. He even added a significant phrase about how she would certainly not tell anyone anything now. Family members immediately had well-founded concerns about a potential fatal scenario. They suspected that the father might have physically eliminated the child, being confident in her silence. When one of the sons attempted to check the girl's room, Rick stopped any such attempts with extraordinary aggression and threat. The atmosphere of fear was so powerful that none of the Thorburns dared to challenge him, and ultimately everyone pretended that nothing had happened. Soon it became absolutely clear: the story about him supposedly dropping off his foster daughter at an educational institution and her subsequent disappearance was an outright manipulation. In reality, he physically could not have done this, as Tiahleigh was no longer in the house at that moment, and most likely, she had already perished. The details of exactly what happened to the girl remained unknown. Rick carefully concealed this information even from the closest family members. During surveillance of conversations, law enforcement repeatedly heard him meticulously instructing those around him about what to say and how to behave to avoid arousing police suspicion, and everyone unconditionally submitted to his instructions. Law enforcement officers began investigative actions by interrogating the sons and mother, believing they would most quickly provide information. Gradually, relatives began to reveal more when detectives presented them with available evidence. The longer the communication continued, the deeper the law enforcement officers understood the true picture of events in the family. Rick had built an extraordinarily well-thought-out strategy designed to create an impression of his care for the family. By repeatedly checking recordings from external cameras of the educational institution, police were ultimately convinced the head of the Thorburn family had extremely carefully planned the crime concealment and prepared false evidence. On that fateful morning, he did indeed make a trip in the direction of the school, and his automobile was captured by several surveillance cameras. However, none of them recorded the slightest confirmation of the girl's presence in the vehicle. A devastating storm of suspicions and criticism immediately descended upon the Thorburn family. Julia and Josh were officially accused of providing false testimony and deliberate attempts to disorient the course of the investigation. Trent was charged with severe forms of violence, and Rick faced the most serious accusation of first-degree murder and intentional manipulation of investigative materials. According to investigators, the man not only deprived a minor of life but also deliberately mutilated the body beyond recognition, calculating how to make victim identification impossible. His brutal plan partially worked. In the initial stage, experts even found it difficult to determine the victim's gender. However, he failed to completely prevent the identification of the victim, especially considering the existence of modern DNA expertise methods, which he apparently was unaware of. Law enforcement officials had unquestionable grounds to consider Rick involved in systematic cruel physical and sexual violence against all children, including his own. In total, 9 diverse charges were formed against him, some of which were not directly linked to the murder. Trent was charged with particularly serious crimes, incest and intentional provision of false testimony. The family vehicle, which was discovered to have been urgently sold immediately after the girl's disappearance, was confiscated for expertise from its new owner. During the vehicle examination, criminalists discovered numerous blood stains. The entire scale of the accusations broke Rick's mental and physical health. On the day of his placement in the detention center, he lost consciousness. His condition was so critical that doctors were forced to keep him in an artificial coma. After several days in the hospital, he eventually regained consciousness. Medical personnel immediately suspected that he had intentionally provoked a health deterioration by taking certain medications. Fortunately, this individual failed to hide or avoid responsibility for the committed crimes. The Torberin family consistently appeared before the court. The cynicism and cruelty of the act shocked the public so profoundly that people were literally outraged to their core. Society was almost unanimous in desiring maximum punishment for a family capable of such inhuman actions against a defenseless child. The accusation was so convincing and substantive that the defense side was practically not taken seriously during the trial. Julia and Josh, realizing the scale of what was committed, declared their guilt on all charges. Moreover, they agreed to serve as additional witnesses against Trent and Rick. The jury, without even resorting to prolonged deliberations, unanimously recognized that all family members were true social monsters.
If you enjoy deep dives into true crime, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Until next time, friends!